Welcome to this week's Eccentric Minute, brought to you by Eccentric. Our first exercise here in the Eccentric Minute is the K-box squat. This is the granddaddy of all of them, guys. One that we use at all levels of our training with a vast array of athletes. A couple big tips. I like to use something for our hands to support it. Make sure that strap is completely taut at the top. Don't leave it short, don't leave it long. What I really like the most about it, guys, the isoinertial wheel, we're going to use this with other squats as well. The other squats are working to depth. These, we're going to get to an athletic position and work our way up. Push hard and make sure you're fighting to hit that braking force. As we cut reps, we usually cut depth as well to make it a little bit more transferable to what we do. This is an awesome exercise that I can't recommend enough. Throw it in your training. It's going to be great for you and your athlete. I really hope you enjoyed this week's Eccentric Minute. Make sure you check them out at eccentric.com to find out everything you need about the K-box and the K-pulley. Before we get to the show, let's play a little game of name association. When I say the names Hank Krasenhoff, Dr. Natalia Verkhoshansky, Brett Bartholomew, Dr. Charlie Weingroff, Dr. Brian Mann, and Dr. Fergus Connolly, what do you think? Well, if the answer to that was they each have multiple lectures in the Strength Coach Network, then you would be right. On top of these sensational lectures from these 6 world leaders, we have well over 100 additional lectures from some of the top practitioners in the world, along with an extremely active forum where there's coaches from all over the world discussing everything in the strength and conditioning world. So hop on over to strengthcoachnetwork.com/CVASPS. That's strengthcoachnetwork.com/CVASPS to dive into all that great content today and get your 48-hour trial for only $1. I look forward to seeing you in the Strength Coach Network. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today, guys, I have the absolute pleasure of being able to sit down and discuss the transfer of training when it comes to speed in athletics with Jonas Dodoo. Guys, after a quick little intro, Jonas dives right into his ideas of projection, reactivity, and switching, and even getting into the role of the weight room when it comes to assisting these aspects of movement. This is going to lead him right into the idea of transducing force as opposed to absorbing it, what that means, why it's important, and what are some things that we can do to help athletes be better with this. He then discusses with us how all of this fits into the rehab world and how it impacts how he works with these injured athletes to assist them to return back to competition. Jonas then runs down the rabbit hole of coaching and communication and why he feels he's had some success with these subsets in the field of coaching and strength and conditioning. We then discuss the mental aspects of training speed and where Jonas sees it as a limitation and a way that you can enhance performance and enhance the results that you get with your athletes. This is really an awesome talk, guys. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Let's get right to it. Jonas, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on board.
Awesome, man. I'm so stoked to have you here. Really fired up for this. For the person who maybe lives under a rock. And where are you at? What you doing, brother? What you up to right now?
I'm a coach. I'm first and foremost a coach. I always have been a coach. And I started in rugby, but now my priority is track and field, and it has been for I feel really old now actually because it has been for 13 years now. But I consult in rugby and football, and I do a lot of rehab with special cases. Often, if people are broken and there are repeat injuries and clubs feel like they can't fix them, then they come to me. So I'm almost a last resort. But apart from that, I'm a dad and I'm turning into a fat coach. So I need to sort myself out. But apart from that, yeah, that's me.
A dad and a fat coach. It sounds like you're, one IPA away from being in America.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Jonas, when the name Jonas Dodoo comes up, the first thing people think about is speed and training things that matter when it comes to speed. Let's talk about that a bit. In your experience through rugby and athletics, where do you see the things that matter?
The things that matter, I mean, it all depends what we're talking about. I think the things that matter are always going to be based on movement efficiency, and just being really clear on on I'm a bit of a simpleton, so I always summarize things into projection, reactivity, and switching. And I think there's a lot of research in acceleration and in Olympic lifts and throws and jumps and more coming out on ACL, and control of lateral of your center of mass in a lateral fashion, and it always comes down to your body's ability to project your center of mass outside, or project it up, or away from where you're coming from. And a lot of our goals in a weight room are about developing the muscle mass around our hips and our legs, our thighs, so we can project. And a lot of our core and our trunk goals are our ability to control our spine and control our trunk, so we can orientate, we can direct where we want to project ourselves, or not where we don't want to go. So a lot of the time it comes down to projection as one of our key goals. Reactivity, the ability to transduce energy. We talk about producing energy for our hips and maybe transducing energy, recycling energy through our tendons, through the ground. And so we end up speaking a lot about the feet, a lot about foot posture, and a lot about the structures around the ankle that support transduction of energy, or just recycling of energy. And then what we don't talk about a lot, and I think what Franz Bosch has brought to really to everyone's mouths, and everyone's talking about it and playing around with it, is switching or limb exchange, and actually the real role of a stable lumbar pelvis, or the real role of our transabdominis and our obliques in the ability to help us optimize and maximize limb exchange. And so this is an area that I've started focusing on a lot 8 or 9 years ago. And actually it seems like the S&C world and the physical performance world is now becoming really fashionable, maybe over the past 3 or 4 years. So in the simplest way of looking at the world, I think if you can understand how the body can produce energy, and project itself, uh, how it can recycle energy and be reactive, and what the role of limb exchange is in supporting that mechanism and maybe enhancing that mechanism, I think that's a really nice and easy place to start. And then you can put all different types of training, all different types of philosophies into that box. Does that make sense?
I love it, because you just dropped something that I have been arguing about with myself and probably some other people for a long time. And you didn't say the body's ability to absorb force. You said the transduction of energy.
Mm,
Let's run down that rabbit hole, my friend, because I think that that's something that a lot of people need to start opening their minds to when it comes to how we train these athletes to move.
okay. What specifically? What should we talk about?
Well, transduction, let's define that first.
Well, I mean, I don't know a pure definition, but I think really it's about, if you whack the ground really hard, and your foot's not in the right place, and perhaps the rest of your joints, your hip, your knee, your ankle, aren't ready to essentially communicate and fire in the right sequence, then you produce a lot of force. You'll end up absorbing a lot of that force. Some of it will be wasted in noise and kinetic energy, but a lot of it won't be given back to you. Whereas you might end up whacking the ground really hard and your ankle's in the right place. You may be really good at initiating that whack of the ground, but already start to withdraw your foot from the ground in maybe the first half of the ground contact, and the joints may be stacked in a way, and the tension in the muscle, essentially the tension in the muscle group that allows the tendon to be stiff and be able to take energy, is all in the right place, and essentially you can get a lot back from the ground. So I think there's a big difference between hitting the ground and absorbing energy, and actually hitting the ground and getting a lot back.
1,000%. So now we're looking at how we move technically, putting
Yeah,
ourselves in the right positions,
yeah,
having the muscular strength for the tendons to be able to be elastic and
yeah,
produce that stretch shortening cycle to produce the force in the movement we're asking them to produce.
exactly. And then the last part of that is orientating it in the direction you want to go. Because
Yeah.
there's no point in being in bouncy and being elastic if all you're doing is going up and down and not going forwards, if that's the goal.
Yeah, unless you're just some sort of trampoline gymnast.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Or maybe you're a high jumper, right?
Yeah.
But if we're talking about speed and we're talking about running fast, then um, I mean, even in the case of a high jump, you are still trying to orientate. It's just the direction of your orientation is different. So yeah, you're right. But either way, it's what is the desired direction you want to go in, and have you organized your body, your center of mass, and actually the timing of firing to make sure you go in that direction. I see plenty of guys run over wickets and they look pretty, man. They look pretty. They hit all the KPIs, but they're running slow. They don't actually know how to orientate themselves forwards. So running over wickets for me is a really important uh, piece of the puzzle. It's a constraint that allows people to figure out how to organize their ground air to ground ratios and how to essentially be reactive. But you need to make sure you're challenging them with those wickets. You're giving them real good spacings, and you're giving them a real good acceleration zone coming into the wickets to make sure they know how to organize their body, make all the right shapes, but do it at 11.5 meters per second. I think there's two big differences there.
Yeah, because, the minute you make things move faster, all of a sudden everything goes to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I mean, simply, I think being able to project yourself, especially as a coach, being able to summarize things into projection, reactivity, and switching, makes it far easier to then organize your training menu. Makes it far easier to start to understand what are your goals and how you manipulate in your environment and your athlete to reach your goals.
And I think that looking at those three, that's a pretty interesting triangle when it comes to this return to performance, rehab, fixing stuff that you're doing with athletes as well.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, for sure. With the rehabbers, the difficulty is that often, I'm usually dealing with rehab that's below the below the belt essentially. So ankles, knees, hips, and with those guys, as soon as you have some kind of, or with any of us, as soon as you have some kind of injury or some kind of trauma, your body down regulates its firing. So a lot of the time, figuring out how to wake up the system and make it feel safe and make it feel confident to whack the ground really hard and then retract the limb off the floor really quickly to do it again. That's where sometimes you find a bit of a barrier, and then so encouraging and finding ways to encourage that to happen, or maybe rebuilding areas that have atrophied, and so it's really unable to make that happen, and dealing with the compensations, and although this might sound weird, helping them create some more compensations to deal with this new limb that is maybe missing some muscle mass or missing some tendon or whatever it is, low in bone health. Helping them find effective strategies that are relatively healthy. That becomes what we end up doing most of the time.
And I think that that's something that a lot of people in the performance realm have a hard time with because of kind of that limitation that some of us may have when it comes to what our scope of practice is.
Yeah, I think we or I was taught, my degree and my master's, I was taught about systems and about different ways of training and all the different kit out there, but I was never really taught how to spot movement. I wasn't really taught how to coach movement. Um, and I found that the coaches that were really good at communicating with athletes and coaching movement had learned it, or had learned it essentially quite intuitively. It was already part of their character. When I was playing rugby, I was I often found myself as a translator for my coach. He would be coaching the group and he'll say X, Y, and Z, and maybe half the group would get it, but half of us wouldn't. And I would end up being the one that turned around and said, okay, well, what he means is this. And what he means is that, and put yourself in this position and put yourself in that. And so I think I fell into coaching quite naturally because communicating what I see into what people feel or vice versa is very easy for me. I'm a bit of a chameleon. I'm very empathetic. And so I think that came quite simply to me. But most people I come across in high paid jobs, in high power roles, dealing with some of the most explosive and most highest valuable athletes in the world, still struggle in communicating their ideas or coaching, essentially still struggle in being a coach. They're really good sports scientists and they're really good physios or really good X, Y, and Z, but they're not able to just communicate or create an environment that helps people learn really quickly. And so that's really what some of my life goals have become, because it's quite easy for me. Hey, but I'm dyslexic. There are some things that I'm not good at, and there's some things that I've learned from those guys, and actually built some really good friendships because there's a lot smarter people than me. But we all have our own gifts, I guess.
No doubt about it. But I think that it is somewhat crazy, right? That these people in the best jobs out there at times are the ones that struggle the most when it comes to actually teaching motor learning and such.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on the job description. Hardly any jobs will, or hardly any industries will put motor learning and communication, or at least coaching, as a high priority within their job description. There are lots of other things in an interview that will matter more than that, and some of it might be the fact that you're a friend of a friend before even your skill sets, or it might be that you went to a certain university, or it might be that you're an ex-player. There are so many other things that create fiefdoms that kind of take away from actually what are the qualities we really need. And in some industries, those qualities are not actually valued. They're not valued in the culture. Even if they are important, they're not valued in the coach. There are many successful coaches in team sports and in individual sports that are successful because they recruit really well. So a lot of the players that come to them have often already have those skill sets, so they don't need to be coached necessarily, or they are very good at deciphering what other people mean in what they say, so they don't get confused by bad coaches. Um, there's an article I think on Martin Boucher's new website where he has articles. I'm really bad on names and stuff, but there was an article from a handball coach that basically I think it was a bit of satire, but it was basically saying something like, "Why bother with speed coaching? Just buy the best players." And actually, that's often the case. That's often the case. Most of my consultancy in team sports, especially long-term consultancy, is with teams who don't have a lot of money, who can't buy the best players, or teams that have a bit of money, but the owner or the chairman or the mission statement of the team is to develop their players, develop their academy players so they can be sold, or develop a homegrown team, 50% of the team being homegrown or something like that. And so these teams and these cultures really value the development of their players. But actually, there's a lot of teams and a lot of cultures that are just like, well, if you can't do it, I'm going to buy someone that can. So often I think that practitioners can get away with not being able to coach or not being able to be highly skilled and knowledgeable in motor learning because it's not really valued within their industry.
No, and that's really like essentially the awesome capitalism that is pro sports, right?
Yeah, for sure. Mm.
I mean, it doesn't make what we do good, bad, or indifferent. It just, if you can't beat them, buy them.
If you can't beat them, buy them, yeah. Or if you haven't got the time, or if you don't believe, often it's said in soccer over here that players can't get faster after the age of 16 or after the age of 18, which is a complete joke. But if you look at the mass numbers of football players who, especially if they've gone through the academy system and they get timed on a regular basis, there's a large database, and you do see this massive lull of speed no longer increasing after a certain point. I'm sure it's got something to do with maturation, but I also think it's got to do with the fact that, well, when maturation no longer is the primary stimulus for the increase in speed, that actually coaches start to get seen for what they're doing or maybe what they're not doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, that just makes sense, right? Like you're just riding puberty's coattails, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, when you have to get somebody better at something, don't make excuses for what's going on here. Figure out a way to make these young men better, because it's not, even at 17, it shouldn't be hard.
I know a really good biomechanist called Paul Bryce, and he talks a lot about, well, his phrase is, everyone can get faster, but not everyone can be fast. And so the reality is, I have masters athletes come to me, or I have forwards in rugby, some of the biggest players that are in the rugby game, who they just assume they can't be fast, or they assume they can't be reactive or be explosive or more explosive. They just think it can't be taught because it's not something they've been told they can develop. They, you know, they're known for being big and bulky, and perhaps have never been given the confidence to believe they can. But I've worked with some 120 kilo 6'2" guys who have increased a tenth or reduced their 10-meter time by a tenth, or their flying time, or have been able to run 9.5 meters per second, and you would wonder, wow. But it's first the belief and the acceptance, that they are able to be faster, that they are able to be more economical. Once you get that into them, then they're easy to coach. In fact, there's lots of low hanging fruit with those guys. If you gave me a team of 15 rugby players, I think I could get more out of the forwards than the backs, which is sometimes a bit counterintuitive.
Well, and I think too, when you bring up biomechanics, I think that that's something, like you said earlier, where a lot of us in this corner of the world of sport have been a little bit left behind, where our ability
Mm,
to look at and find the low hanging fruit in the movement to start that ball rolling, because the best way to
mm.
get buy-in is to give them a result early, right?
Yeah, yeah, straight away. Straight away. Most of the times you can get a, especially team sports, you can get a player in and you can automatically make them buy in and believe that this is the right path, by just teaching them some tricks of the trade, teaching them some, just like I think a lot of the time our body is great at compensating, and we can cheat. We can cheat to make ourselves feel lighter. We can cheat to create a bit more power. We can find loads of different ways in a session to cheat, and a lot of that cheating is just by turning off our safety mechanisms. A lot of the time, when you start a session, and just by giving someone some mobility through their spine, some disassociation, getting them to be able to activate their glutes without having excess lumbar extension. How to create plantar, how to create a neutral ankle, and how to get all of the foot intrinsic muscles and ankle stabilizers to be on and be awake. How to get lots of good co-contraction and get the quad and the posterior chain and the anterior chain to find its timing, so that when it's time to hit the ground, everything is contracted, but then quickly everything relaxes. Some of those tricks of the trade just make it really simple. And acceleration sometimes is just getting people to turn off on, you won't turn off your fear of falling, but to ignore or to utilize their fear of falling, so that they can displace their center of mass even further away from themselves. Um, those are really simple tricks that make people feel faster, move faster, challenge themselves outside of their normal comfort zone, and automatically you've got them. You had me at hello. That gets them to go, okay, wow, okay, this is different to usual. I not just you told me it was different. I didn't just try something. I felt it. It sounded different. I moved quicker. I moved further. I created scary angles. I spent more time in the air and less time on the ground. So getting these guys to buy in is really important. As for your prior point about biomechanics leaving us behind, I think sometimes it's been overcomplicated. I think it's really easy to sell loads of courses and to get lots of followers and likes by by mystifying sprint training. But so my goal is almost the counter to that. I like to demystify sprint training. When I tell people on our courses that, look, these three things, projection, reactivity, and switching, that's all you need to know. And everything else is gonna stream down from that, but it's always gonna come back to this umbrella term. People say, no way. I was with the LTA last week with a bunch of a really good group of coaches. And actually, by the end of it, they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, works. It makes sense. It works. It maybe takes an hour to describe in different ways why it works and how simple it is, and give them lots of examples to get them to go, okay, well, yeah, actually, it applies in my field. It applies in our environment. But once you've got that, yeah, it's pretty easy. So I think we want it to be complicated. We can't believe that running very fast is simple, because when we try to do it as individuals, we realize how difficult it can be. But everyone can get faster. Not everyone can be fast. Everyone can get faster.
Right.
You got to demystify it all.
Yeah, and it's not that saying that it's simple doesn't mean it's not complex.
Mm. Exactly. But I think things that are complex seem like you can't control them until you break them down into their parts and put them into connected parts. I think when it feels too complicated is when you can't see the puzzle. But if you start with the corners and then build in, I saw it's really weird. There was a love film on BBC One the other day, so it's really weird that I'm bringing it up. But he talked about when you're in a bit of a puzzle and you've got a puzzle in front of you, start with the corners and then collect all the blue bits. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. It's like, okay, start with what you know is the extremes, the ends of the bandwidths, and then start to collect things that are similar, things that make sense. And then actually, once you start to do that, you start to realize the picture's pretty simple in front of you. It's just you had all the broken bits, and maybe they were upside down and in the wrong order, and because of that, you were confused. But for me, our training menu, kind of our philosophy, how we look at the world and look at training, helps us put all the bits into order, put them in the right way round, and kind of gives us a bit of a map of the territory.
I love that, man, because then it's just like identifying the problem, starting from there, and then working your way out from it.
Yeah, for sure. And each time you're given a new way of training, a new training philosophy, a new guru super coach who comes up with some system. Henk Kozenkov has got an article. It's probably 4, 5, 6 years old. It might not be, but it seems like it is, because he's basically saying, who's the next person to come up with this new way of training and this new philosophy of movement? Because whoever brings up this new one, I'll just refer back to something 60 years ago or 80 years ago, and you'll realize that it's just a reinvention of the wheel. And so I think you need a really good bullshit filter as a coach, so that you can go, this might not be bullshit, but it's not brand new. Don't be intimidated by this new information, because actually, boom, 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 this is what they're saying, and it's very similar to what we said over here, and it's very similar to this other guy. It's just he's looking at it from the top down, and we're looking at it from the bottom up. Or I always say in a crowd of people, especially if I'm facing an audience, if I draw a W on the floor, I see a W, but you as the audience see an M. And that's just a recognition that we could be talking about the same thing, but our perspective is different. So we're now bickering online about what is coaching, what is teaching, when actually it's all the same stuff, guys. It's all the same stuff, but we want our semantics. I'm a dyslexic, so I semantics to me go over my head. Things that are similar are similar. E's and threes are the same to me. Q's, P's, and D's can be easily mistaken for me. But I think as a result, it allows me to look at things and go, okay, that's similar to this, so I'm going to put it in the same box. It's not going to confuse me. I'm going to put it in the same box. If we dial down to the real nitty gritty detail, yeah, we may describe it a bit differently. But if we took a step back from it, we're going to see the forest for the trees, and we're not going to become confused by this new information, or we're not going to become intimidated by this new information. And I think that's an important aspect that maybe 3 or 4 years into my journey, I started to realize.
I love that, man, because at the end of the day, like, first of all, Hank is awesome. He's one of my favorite people on the planet, and Babalejo has said the same thing, where he talks about, tell me what they call it today, and I'll tell you what we called it 20 years ago.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
But I love that, man. And understanding, though, that vernacular is important and us being
Mm,
able to communicate is important, but
mm.
fighting over whether it's coaching or teaching, we might need to get a life.
Yeah, and I think when you get deeper into the fight of between different systems or different vernacular, you start to understand people's personal reference, and then you start to understand why they're saying what they're saying, and start to understand a bigger meaning behind it, and then actually you've learned something, that they don't want to call it this because this old coach or this environment they used to be in used to call it that, and actually it meant that lots of other things came along with it. So I get that, I understand that, but again, I don't want to get lost in that.
No, because losing the forest for the trees is never a good thing. But Jonas, let me get you out of here on this, man. Where can people see what you're doing? Where can they find out more about what's going on out there?
So yeah, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. I'm not always the guy posting. I have some other guys, my wife and some guys that work with us doing it. I'm not always good on social media. But we've got a website, we've got a bunch of great workshops coming up in the autumn. We've got 10 weeks of Wednesday evening workshops with a great group of speakers, different guys and girls each week. And we're going to invite people to come and learn from professionals and academics from different environments who are all coming to kind of help people figure out transfer, how you can take what you're learning, and how you can take your philosophy and make sure you develop your coaching eye so that what you're developing in one environment transfers to the most important environment. So those transfer seminars or our 10 weeks of seminars are going to be launched soon. Some of it will be available online. But yeah, that's going to be based up in Loughborough, and we're really keen to get as many people to come, and learn and to network. In the meanwhile, we've got Adarian Barr coming in August. He's doing a bit of a roadshow over England and also visiting Dublin. And we've got Tony Holler coming in September to do the similar kind of roadshow. And those guys, listen, if I've got any guys coming over for workshops or seminars, it's really because I want to learn from them myself. They're guys that are familiar to me or have similar philosophies, and are saying something a bit different, saying something that's making me think. So if they make me think, I think other people should want to hear from them. So we've got those guys coming over, and then our autumn series will be published soon with all of our great speakers. So guys, find me online, find me on Twitter, find me on Instagram, Eat Sleep Train or speedworks.training. Happy to get back to any DMs or any emails or anything like that.
Love it, brother. Keep up the great work, my man. I truly appreciate it, and thank you so much for your time today.
No, good to be on. And guys, I love your stuff. I've been listening to it for so long. Like I said before this, hearing your voice kind of made me think, oh, are we on the phone or am I listening to a podcast? So yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be involved.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch real soon. And a huge thanks to Jonas Dodoo for spending the time with us today. Guys, just some open, honest, candid sharing from a man really leading from the front when it comes to getting athletes faster and getting them back onto the field. I can't thank Jonas enough for his time today. There are a billion nuggets in this talk. This was absolutely sensational. Jonas, can't thank you enough for your time, your open, honest, and candid sharing. And on top of that, all that you're sharing with us through social media. So guys, make sure you hop over to Twitter and Instagram. Give them a follow at Eat Sleep Train _. That's at Eat Sleep Train _ on both Twitter and Instagram. Give him a follow. He's putting out great stuff. And as always, if you did enjoy the talk, please share it through the social media outlet of your choice. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be. As always, we're just trying to get the best information out to all the great coaches that we can. And as always, guys, thank you for everything that you do for us here at Central Virginia Sport Performance. We will be back next week with another awesome guest. We will see you then.